speak to his teammates and they seem to be able to respond to him. So that's big.
Look who now joined us on the program. At this time, we're joined by the head basketball coach of the Franklin Broncos, 1B champs, and you didn't jinx him, Ed. He's in the state finals. I didn't pick him last week. Ed picked you, coach, and you're in the championship round. And by the way, Lamar Barrett, NBA scout, Franklin native, is scrambling right now. He's trying to get in the building. I don't know if he's trying to get into freebie as a media credential, but he's got to be there. Franklin, he's gathering up all his Franklin friends. I think he's got to leave the SEC or Big Ten tournament. Robbie Cutchins with us. Coach, congratulations. You're playing for the hardware.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I told this nut job I'm going with Franklin. He says –
well, look, a couple things I got to get out of the way real quick. I got 3 things I want. I've been sitting here listening to some great interviews, okay?
And you've been on for an hour waiting, so we thank you immensely.
Yeah, no, much love, man. I love listening to these coaches. These guys are very knowledgeable. They know the game. They've been around the game, and it's just a lot of fun all the way around. So I've enjoyed sitting in the background and listening. But last week when I got on, you guys were talking about teams scoring 100, 110, 120 points. And obviously I told you that scared me to death. It takes us 3 games to even remotely get close to that.
Right.
Today, when I get on, you're talking about Ed Young crowd surfing. Now, that really makes me nervous. I hadn't had any breakfast this morning. I didn't get to bed about 4 o'clock this morning. But these are things that are really unwelcoming, if you will.
Hey, Rob, you now see what I got to put up with. And these previous coaches, they tell me, they said, Ed, I don't know, how the hell you do it with him? I go, I'm serving now so I can get to heaven later. Okay,
I love it, man. That's good stuff. But all due respect, Ed, I really appreciate you believing in us and believing in what we do, because obviously I need Matt to keep picking against us, because that is working in our favor.
It is.
You know, normally when we stop, I tell the guys, hey, we go to McDonald's because we can't afford anything else. But last night we ended up going to Cookout, and as we're walking in the Cookout, a couple of my assistants said, hey, Cut, have you noticed Hatfield ain't picked us yet? I said, man,
that's why we're going to Cookout.
Keeps picking us, we're good.
Yeah, that's why you're going to Cookout. But, you know, I don't, you know, I kind of was picking with my heart instead of my head, because Lancaster's pretty damn good. But I said, hold on. I'm going to go with it. What the hell? Because Robert's got – I know you. I know you a little bit more than I know the Lancaster people. He's got his kids playing hard. I know you've been through some stuff this year. And it's not one of your better teams. I mean, I've had to go get some of your better teams. Like, what the hell this year I picked to play this guy for? But it's just something I felt from a distance that they're going to put it together. They're going to do something, and that was not an easy game. And you're up there.
It's an extremely tough place to play. And hats off, first of all, to Lancaster. Dwayne Penn's done a phenomenal job since he's been there. He and I rapped a little bit last night when we first got up there, and I told him I know he's been through some stuff as well this year, but he's done a phenomenal job with that crew. And you know, with all the love and the text messages and the phone calls that we've been getting, and myself, and it's like I tell guys that there's nothing sexy about this group. You know, as we talked about last week on the air, you know, we don't have marquee names. We don't have guys that everybody in the state is running to watch. But if you love scrappiness, if you like defense, and you love just getting after it for 32 minutes, that's what keeps us in basketball games, and that's what we do.
Works that way. Well, tell me about last night's game with Lancaster, because certainly they're a team that was playing really well. They had hit a rocky patch. You referenced a little bit, and Dwayne Penn's, you know, his best player goes to John Marshall and Troy Henderson. It's a new group, but they started to hit their stride. What was sort of the things that enabled you to get that win and keep them bottled up? Because your defense, much like we talked about with Green Run in Class 5, oh my goodness, they hold Woodside to below its norm, the fewest points they've scored in a basketball game in literally 13 years. You're able to hold a really good Lancaster group to 34 points as well. They scored 77 on Alta Vista in the quarterfinal round.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing we talked about. And obviously, since we figured out what our identity was as the season went on this year and understood that it was going to be certain things we needed to do defensively, you know, we pick points totals. We look and see what teams have done throughout the season. We look to see what they're averaging. We look to see what their lowest point total is, the lowest point total they've had in the game this year. And then going into last night, Lancaster's lowest output, I think, was 47 points. So we made it a point to say, hey, okay, guys, if we can hold them under 50, we got a chance in this game. Now, granted, I didn't know until after the game, because I was talking to one of the radio guys up there before and after the game, and I laughed. I said, well, I didn't know we had to hold them under 40 because we weren't going to score with 41 points. But bottom line, if you play defense, you can stay in basketball games. The kids doing a phenomenal job.
And now, Ed, they take on a machine in George Wythe that can really shoot the basketball. And in terms of points being scored, they do it at a different level than just about anybody in Class 1, as they're averaging, I want to say, about 73, 74 points per game. So it's going to be a big
challenge. 75.
75. I was up by 1 or 2. I was
close. I had to look at that last night on the way home. I said, good gracious, let me see how bad it is. So.
Yeah, so it's a big matchup for you. But even before you dig into that matchup, going back to a little bit of the defense, what are the things in order that you have to preach on in order to play that type of defense? And you shouted out a couple of names last week, but tell us about, we're so concerned about points, rebounds, but tell me about the guys that are getting you the deflections, the blocks, the hustle plays that translate to you getting those leads and winning these ball games.
You know, the cool thing about it is, obviously, I mean, you have to have some speed. You have to have some athleticism. And you know, a lot of times in some of these other coaches, we talked about guys that are on college radars, et cetera, that have the basketball talent, if you will. But we've taken a lot of our athleticism and our speed and tried to put them in the right spots. And once kids understood that, hey, you know, you flying around and causing ruckus and contending shots and contesting shots or whatever and cutting off drives doesn't necessarily mean that we have to get traps and steals all the time. It just means that you're keeping them in front. You're making them force up bad shots. You get some long rebounds, and it slows the game down in a sense that until kids actually see it, they don't understand it. And I think that's one thing in the second half of the season, and as we started to make this run, that the kids have really, really got excited about, because then they found out what their true identity was, and they've been able to get after it.
Ed?
Well, I think, Rob, it's easy to sell offense because ball and basket, you know, when they're little and they grab a ball, the first thing they do, they bounce it. If you put a basketball in, they'll throw it in. So the defense is where we have our struggles of making kids really buckle down and try to make them understand, as good as an offensive player you can possibly be, there's only one ball. But on defense, there's 5 positions.
Yeah.
And apparently you have sold that. And you're not in a big crowd, because a lot of really good coaches have trouble selling the defense, and now they have to think, damn, we're going to have to score 80 points because we can't hold anybody under 77. But your guys have done it, because Lancaster, again, is a team that can score it. You're going to play with a team that can score it. And is there any reward system, trick system that you got your kids to say, you know what, coach, we got this. We're going to play the D. We're going to defend that. We're going to go for that loose ball. We're going to get deflection. Anything in particular you've done, or it's just a buy-in period?
It's just a buy-in period, Ed. It's nothing one thing. And like we talked about last week, obviously I'm big on culture. I talk about it all the time because that's what I say to the kids. You know, you buy into a culture, you can be successful once you find out what your identity is. And when you have kids coming up and asking, you know, hey, Cut, what's their highest point total of the year? You know, but what's their lowest point total of the year? Can we hold them to this? They don't care what they're doing individually. You know, they don't care about who's scoring this and who's doing that. Yes, we have guys that lead our team offensively, obviously. You know, Christian Grant's done a phenomenal job with the ball in his hands. Our big man, Kamari Hicks, who I also think is one of the better players in the state at our level, has done his thing this year. But just like last night, he didn't have a big offensive game, but he altered a ton of shots and he pulled down 11 rebounds. He had a huge game against Northumberland in the quarterfinal game the other night, but you just never know whose night it's going to be. And I think that's one thing that makes this group special. You know, and just like last night, not a very high scoring game. So you get a couple guys that knock on double figures, but you got other guys that are making all the plays that aren't in the stat book. And that's what makes this team so special.
Robbie Cutchins, head basketball coach of the Region 1B champion Franklin Broncos, our guest here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on CoVA Sports TV. Franklin in action coming up on Friday, March 14th at 2:30 at the Siegel Center in Richmond, VCU, to take on George Wythe's Bulldogs, 26-4. They've been ranked number 1 in the state all year, has Wythe. And Franklin coming back from a 2-8 start. They put a lot of schools that were in the Class 6, Class 5, Class 4 levels to help prep them for their Tri-Rivers District and the region tournament that they had. And here they are playing for the state championship. First time, is it since 93 or 94, Coach?
93. It's the only time Franklin High School has been in the state championship game.
How about that? And that was a few years after our buddy Lamar, Eddie. I think Lamar graduated there in the 80s before he went to Elizabeth City State. So pretty neat run here for these Broncos.
Well, with Lamar, I don't know. I think Franklin was probably his best 9 years of his life. I don't know if he just ran across the stage or he just left. I don't know. He ain't listening right now, so I can say that.
No,
but it's
he's
true.
at some game, so he's not listening. You're right.
Yeah, he's handling business, but he's going to make sure he represents the Broncos one way or the other at BCU.
Yeah.
Well,
listen, I even had I was with, as you know, Coach, I was with our OD women's basketball team in Florida, Pensacola. And fortunately, big shout out to Kieran Donahue, former men's assistant coach and was interim coach last year for Jeff Jones. He's giving me a ride back to the airport yesterday. And he's like, I was telling Dennis Wolf, our buddy Lamar's got to represent Little Franklin High School next week in the state championship. They win tonight against Lancaster. And lo and behold, you did it. So it's even made the word all around the globe right now.
Yeah, man, it's awesome, man. I think we touched on it last week, man. The 1A level gets undersold a lot, in my opinion. And the Northern Neck is full of athletes. They got great support up there. But Chuck and I, the AD from Lancaster, were texting a few minutes ago, and he's like, man, I think we had over 1,300 people there last night, and I'm like, it just shows, man, you put good products on the floor, good programs on the floor, a lot of good things happen, communities come together, and the fan support was awesome from both sides, from Lancaster and Franklin represented well up there.
Yeah, we got to shout out some guys that are former real quick coaches and ADs that are watching, principals like Andrew Duggan at South Lakes, who was watching over with Mike Desmond. I know you got a lot of respect, Ed, for Chuck Parrish over there too.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with what you're saying. I coached at Little Suffolk High School when I first came to Virginia. We won the '87 state title, went to states a couple years, and it was, we beat people like Booker T. We beat a lot of the AA, AAA teams back at that time. And the story I always said when I got the Norview job after the '88 season, I was told you can't schedule any single or AA teams, and I'm like, why not? Because of what you did against Booker T last year as a Suffolk coach. You beat Booker T, which PO'd up some people up in that area. And I'm like, wait a minute, we were pretty doggone good. I mean, we weren't no fly-by-nighters. And the support. And Chuck called me yesterday getting some ideas about how things are going on with some of the other teams in the state. And he said, we feel blessed to be at home, number one, which I said, you guys shouldn't be. It should be neutral floor and all that. We got into that conversation. But he said how
it took 2 hours with you, but go ahead.
Right. How the support is going. They're putting in a new turf football field up there in Lancaster. They're going to get a new track. I said, that's the way you should be doing it. I said, the smaller schools, the support is tremendous because, and he made mention, I talked with a good buddy of mine. You might know Mike Stevenson used to coach at Northumberland, longtime veteran. I talked to him yesterday and we were talking about it. And he said that the support at the smaller schools is you don't have a lot of other flair going on. And he made a great point in Northern Neck. You don't got discotheques. I said, Mike, they don't have discotheques no more. Well, you don't have clubs to go to. You don't have this to go to. It's the game. The game itself is the big thing. Whereas in the 6A, 5As, in the more metropolis-sized areas, there's other things to take people's money.
Yeah. And I'll just give you a quick example. Go to our message boards on VirginiaPreps.com. I know it's a shameless plug for our site. There are more posters and message posts on you guys in Class 1 and Class 2 than the larger classifications, because I think a lot of your fans, Coach, you can speak to this, they live and breathe it. It is their community, and they really look forward to it at a different level, where I think some of the fans, and this isn't meant to be derogatory, but I think they're just accustomed to it in Class 6, Class 5. It's almost the fast-moving world, whereas in Class 1, Class 2, this is like they live it, eat it, and breathe it.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%, Matt. It's one of them things. You have a mix, obviously, but we've got a lot of people outside the city now that support as well. But the people within the city fan base, whether they have kids coming through the system or whether they've just been, long-term fans of the high school, they support, man. They look forward to it. And obviously, we live in a world of just, a lot of doom and gloom, if you will. So anytime you have something positive happening, it brings so many people together. And I think I might have touched on this last week, but sports unifies people. It brings people together, all walks of life, and having people celebrate and hug and love like I've seen over the last month it's special to me. It's very warming, and like I said, we've knocked on that door a few times, man, but we had a hard time getting over the hump. One district, we've been to the regional championship game. We finally won that this year, and we've been to the state tournament a few times, but we were never able to get over the hump. And I think that culture has finally started taking its toll and it's paying dividends for these kids. And I love it when I see the community come together like they have.
few minutes with Robbie Cutchins, head basketball coach of the Franklin Broncos, with us here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk. They're getting ready to take on George Wythe coming up on Friday, March 14th in the state finals at VCU, the Siegel Center in Richmond. NFHSnetwork.com is the place to subscribe and watch the games if you can't make it there in person to root on Franklin, George Wythe, whoever you want to see in those games, as you got wall-to-wall action beginning on Thursday and concluding on Saturday night. And before I let Ed jump back in here with you, Coach, we'll be helping getting these keys prepared for the game. Give me a couple that are going to be important for your team against this very explosive Wythe squad. That, I mean, we talked so much about John Marshall in Class 2, a juggernaut. I think if Wythe was in Class 2, they could be competitive because if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they beat a Class 6 Annandale this year. Isn't that right? Did we lose you, Coach? I think you might have froze up here.
It did freeze up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said, correct me if I'm wrong. We talked so much about John Marshall in Class 2 being such a juggernaut. If I'm not mistaken, and you might know this better than me, looking at research, I think George Wythe as a Class 1, they could compete with a lot of Class 2s and Class 3s. Didn't they play or beat Annandale at Class 6 this year?
Yes, you're exactly right. You know, this George Wythe team, I remember 2 years ago, obviously Lancaster's back-to-back state champion at 1A. But 2 years ago, I sat there and watched George Wythe play Lancaster, and I said, man, this team is young. I said, and they are good. I said, and they can shoot the ball extremely well. I expected to see them in the state championship in 23, which we did, again in 24, which I think Auburn maybe knocked them off last year. Mm-hmm. But I thought they were going to be there 3 years in a row just because of how impressed I was with them. So they're a very, very good basketball team. The bottom line is we got to keep them out of 70s. We got to keep it down a little bit and try to keep them in front of us. But they do a very good job. And I told somebody this morning, it seems like everything they do offensively is on a string. It's very, you know, their motions are very good. Their angles are very good. It's not a lot of wasted space, if you will. Everything is very efficient, and we got to be able to cut down on a lot of those lanes.
And I'd imagine getting to the free throw line is a big deal to win that battle, the physicality to make it a game they're not used to playing in terms of, like you said, style, tempo, and tenor. Yeah,
and I think that's a big thing. You know, it's not always consistent, but a lot of times you look at the different regions throughout the state, you know, from the east side of the state to the west side of the state. Sometimes you have extremely good shooting basketball teams on the west side of the state, it seems like, throughout years past. You know, but there are also some very good defensive teams on the west side of the state, but then you bring, you know, extremely good defense from the east side, and it just kind of counters, and you kind of hope that's kind of what happens this go around. You know, it kind of balances things out, and we can make it a heck of a basketball game.
Ed?
You know, Robbie, we talked with Doug Craig, Mike Desmond, and Greg Maynard before you. As I think you heard some of those. My comment to them, some of them was, okay, what do you guys do now in taking us through preparation? So I'm going to ask you, and you're taking your Franklin team today. Obviously, you're probably watching some film, but the kids, no practice today, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe.
No, I love Coach's approach a while ago. We're trying to get our legs back, and we're trying to keep our legs under us, man. I got a couple guys that are limping right now, just, you know, from deep thigh bruises and stuff. So I'm trying to keep them off their feet as much as possible. And so, yeah, it's more preparation now than it is actually, you know, on your feet and things of that nature. And that's the same approach we took throughout the region this year, and the same approach we've taken into the state tournament.
Now, when you get back on the floor on Monday, you got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Take us through. I know a lot of times us coaches will cut practice time down as the season goes over, save some legs. We do some Franklin work. We do some skill work, whatever. How will your practices be if you could take us behind the scenes? And also, if you would too, because we allowed the other coaches to do it, shout out your assistant coaches who you know, who's helping you and how your preparation is those 3 days.
Yeah, man. The cool thing about, you know, your staff, and I'm sure everybody has a unique story. So mine probably is no different than anybody else's. But, you know, I've got 5 assistants that do help me. 4 of them are extremely invested. The other one has been with me for a while. But out of those guys, 4 of those 5 guys have played for me. They've been through the program at some point in time throughout the years. And they know what it's about. You know, we're not doing a lot of things different now than we were then. But that goes back to the culture. You know, I've got Donzel Sharon, who was a quarterback on the 2008 state championship football team at Franklin, who was one of the best athletes I ever coached. He's my head JV coach, my head assistant on varsity. I have Adam Grant, who was a great basketball player, played for me briefly.
Wait, that's the Adam Grant that played at Bryant University, Norfolk Collegiate?
Adam Grant played it. Brian played overseas. He actually played JV ball for me back in the day.
I remember. I didn't know he was on your staff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's been on my staff the last 2 years, and he and I are good friends. And he wanted to come back home and wanted to help, and obviously you like to have somebody like that. Kenneth Kendrick, good friend of mine, he's on the staff. Terry Warren and Reggie Ralph. So it's cool because you got a lot of Franklin guys that have blue and gold in their blood from back when, and they do a heck of a job. And in the coaches group chat this morning, some of the coaches were texting back and forth, but they thank me for letting them be a part of it, which I didn't. That's not what it's about, And then they're saying, yeah, but you listen to us, When we get in your ear, you take what we tell you, and you don't mind putting that to use. And I think that's what makes successful programs, because as Coach was saying a while ago from I think it was Woodson. Those guys know a lot. Your assistants, they are very knowledgeable, but I mean, they're spitting back the same thing to me that I was drilling in them years ago, but they can see things that you may or may not see throughout the game when they're sitting there and the mind's not racing and storming the sidelines. So, but the assistant coaches are awesome, and they're a huge part of what we do.
That's great to hear. Well, we thank you for stopping on for a few minutes. We look forward to being a part of the broadcast coverage, whether it's me on camera or Ed on camera. We'll definitely be help preparing our production team with the keys and the game notes. I'll probably hit you up later this week for some of our stats for previews of the game, if that's cool. But we look forward to it. It's going to be fun for Franklin and George Wythe to go head-to-head. I know history's going to be made. George Wythe has been knocking on this door, and you guys over there at Franklin could be first ever to get that done. That would be something special, and it's going to be a memorable day either way coming up on Friday in the Class 1 finals. Always a pleasure. I'll make sure I don't pick you. Ed will pick you. That's the good juju. And you're a voter for no crowd surfing for Ed Young is what you say, right? No crowd surfing?
Yeah, man. I don't think that's safe for anybody involved. But yeah, on a different note, we've been underdogs all year, man. Other than the regional quarterfinal game, I think we hosted at home against Buffalo Gap. So the kids embraced that and they enjoyed that.
Yeah, from 2-8 to here we are in a state championship. What a wonderful story it is for you and the Broncos. All the best, my friend, and we'll talk to you coming up on Friday.
Matt, I appreciate you guys, man. Have a good day.
Hey, enjoy the run. We'll be up there to see you and have fun with those kids. And like I said, I'm going to pick you, I think, overall with probably a little bit more talented, but you reminded me of the NC State team years back. Boy, it was destiny. So when you win it, you're running around trying to hug somebody. Don't hug me.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be running around because I probably wouldn't be able to walk. I've been a hot mess, man. Regional championship, to get that and then to win these last two games, man, it puts you in a different state. So I appreciate it.